song, boy. Get my song, boy. Get my song, boy. Yeah, get my song, boy.
Really love, and in between the band, but people still like to dance and they want to hang out and they want to stay at the party. So the DJ is playing everything from six rock and reggae and ska. In the 80s, you would go to a club and hear all those things together in the same mix. Like I could go to the Cat Club and it would be a goth night, but the DJ might also throw in Kraftwerk, and having that be...
Yeah, get my song, boy.
So speaking of punk, punky reggae, and Ari Up of the Slits, for a number of reasons. She was of German influence on her singing style, as well as a lot of songs that she covered. A cover of Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, I heard it. She also was a big student of John Holt, as well as Dennis Bovell. And if you look at some of what she did with On You Sound, you can hear those influences as well. I was very drawn to that scene at the same time. One of her dear friends was a New York artist who also lived back and forth between the States and London, Judy Nylon. And Judy Nylon collaborating with Voice. One of her biggest hit songs being Love in a Lift. And then she also had a woman in New York named Patti Paladin called Snap, is on the list of people that I look to.
Yeah, my song, boy.
So at this point, I'd mentioned a few artists that kind of got their roots in punk and some early club, about 1977 to 1982. In New York, really just giving an unusual take to the sounds. Were very unapologetic and fearless, and about the 70s and early 80s. So a lot of the terminology, we ticks and whatnot. And you know, Judy Nylon is my kind of adopted. It happened then, but again, the terminology is very different. So I don't want to change history with that. But another interesting thing that happened during that time, because punk had a bad reputation, it wasn't considered cool. So the American market wave. And the thing about new wave that made it marketable and quote unquote often described that new wave was plans behind it. During the new wave time, there was still, and one of those artists was Lenny Lovitch, with a very unusual vocal attack, something between theatrical and operatic. She was also really very out there compared to the slick Paul Blondie or Scandal or those artists. She was more in alignment with her colleague Nina Hagen. So they were giving heavy makeup, something a little gothic, extreme punk, a little bit and her hit song Lucky Number was a dance hit and a new wave hit and a shortly after that, she went on to collaborate with Nina Hagen. I remember being specifically about animal rights, and it was called Don't Eat the Animals. It was also a big dance hit. Yeah, she's a very interesting person because she had I think a theater background also, and tried to commercialize herself or polish herself in any way. She seemed authentic, as did Nina Hagen.
Yeah, my song, boy.
Speaking of Nina Hagen, a friend of mine, and that's when I heard Nina's song, New York, New York. Nina aspired to a lot of the same elements vocally as Lenny Lovitch, but I would say even more extreme in this track in particular, which was pretty big dance. Features some German kind of guttural rapping, which again was a new area color to embark upon in the 80s. So she's rapping, she's singing theatrically, telling a very gritty story, and it's danceable. And that was a really big hit song for her as well, that she was pretty daring to try those things all at once at the time, because it definitely, outside of hip hop culture that you would hear rapping then would be Blondie on Rapture. And that was also, again, extremely unusual and kind of phenomenal that it became such a mainstream song.
Yeah, my song, boy.
Another thing that was kind of happening during the time of, we're starting to filter into new wave, and this goes back to London with bands like Bow Wow Wow. Bow Wow Wow is very interesting Ari, when they both started their bands, they were like 14 and 15 years old, which now, if you can only imagine, we have younger pop stars now, but they were touring with grown men during this time. So it was a very extreme dynamic. Another thing that's interesting about Annabella is her lyrics were also very political and playful, not being materialistic. And maybe because she was a cute young woman, people took it with a grain of salt. She's still performing to this day with that same message and the same conviction. So a lot of the things that she did vocally were a bit similar to Ari. She did animal sounds. She didn't sing in a different language, even though her background is Burmese. She also grew up in London, and she brought in different elements of American rock and roll to the music. The thing that drew me personally to Bow Wow Wow, the Bo Diddley big beat and rockabilly guitar of new wave. I was coming from listening to surf records and whatnot before new wave existed. So hearing that with someone as punk as they were was a big influence to kind of follow in those footsteps.
Yeah, my song boy.
I'm bringing it back from the UK for a moment to talk about an artist people don't necessarily associate with America, but she is based in New York City, and that's Yoko Ono. At the same exact time that Bow Wow Wow's I Want Candy and Sinner, Sinner, Sinner hit Walking on Thin Ice. And that song has been remixed multiple times. She is in her 80s and still performing. She's not someone people think of as a vocalist initially. She was in psychedelic music with the Plastic Ono Band for many, many years. And she hasn't changed her approach to music or philosophy or life at all. Obviously, living in New York City affected her as an artist, and she brought that to her work. She still has a way of being very aware that she's seen, and she brings that to the music. And her voice is unusual. It's hers, and she owns it.
Yeah, my song boy.
So we're still talking about the era of roughly 1981 to 1982, coming on the heels of Yoko Ono's Big Dance. I want to mention another unusual vocalist from. She had a huge gospel presence in the voice of a tiny white woman, and it was she really broke out in black radio. The first song I heard by her was Square Biz, and her